Welcome to part 3 of our watercolour collage project. In this video, we will be completing our piece by adding our collage layer. We will be further experimenting with watercolour pencils and learning new techniques to create a bird. Let's get started. The materials we will be using in this video are 300 GSM hot press paper, a lead pencil, an eraser, watercolour pencils, a watercolour brush, I'm using a size 2, a craft knife, a glue stick, a white gel pen, and any reference material that you may need. Using a HP pencil, I'm going to start off with by lightly sketching in the shape of the bird. When you're drawing an object, it's easier for you to break it down into the basic shapes like you can see I'm doing here. A circle for the head, a half circle for the body, a triangle for the tail, and so on. This is because our brain has an easier time focusing on the basic shapes, not the bird as a whole. Make sure your construction lines are very light because you don't want them showing through when you start applying your colour. Using a HB or a 2B pencil is the best for this because the graphite is harder in them and you will get a softer line. Don't worry too much about the little details because they will be filled in once you start filling in the colour. So just make sure you have the basic shape of the bird. Once you're happy with the basic shape of the bird, it's now time to start getting ready to colour. Here I have a selection of watercolour pencils. I'm starting off with the lightest colours first because in watercolour you work light to dark. And I'm just colouring on the surface with the watercolour pencil. Because these pencils are highly pigmented, you don't need to put a lot of colour down to get payoff. You can use just a small amount, and as you can see, once I apply the wet brush, the colour spreads out quite far. As you can see, I'm using that same swatch to spread the colour out across the bird and just picking up colour from that swatch and applying it now to the face, just lightly. Because I used a water-soluble graphite, you can see that the pencil lines that I drew in the beginning are just fading into the painting when I apply water. Now using a dry pencil, I'm going over the wet surface to create a more intense colour on the wing. Doing quick strokes in a feathered-like manner will create that texture of feathers. Now using a dark olive green, I'm going to start adding some of the details in for shadows. Placing a shadow around the eye is important because it makes it look like the eye is actually sitting in the bird and not just floating on the surface. Just using quick short strokes to give that fluffy feathered texture over the top of the surface. When you're drawing an eye on anything, be it animal or person, it's always important to leave a white highlight. This is what gives your drawing life and makes it look more realistic. Now going through with an indigo pencil, I'm just shading in roughly where I'm going to put the darker colours. Because I'm spreading it out with watercolour with water, you don't need to be too precise with where you're putting the colour to begin with. I'm using this same blue now to place a shadow underneath the wing to give it shape. Really make sure you define the darks and the lights. This is what's going to give your drawing shape and make it look more three-dimensional. Here I'm using my indigo pencil over the wet surface and just doing quick strokes to represent feathers. You can see that in the spots where it's really wet, the pencil is darker, and the spots where it's dry, it's quite light. This is what helps give it that textured feeling and make it look like a feathered wing. As I stated in the previous video, it's always good to make sure that your pencils are really sharp. Using a sharp point is going to help you be more precise. The beauty of watercolor pencils is you don't have to apply as much water to the surface as you do with watercolor paints. So it means that you can use a lower GSM paper if desired. It also means you can get more detailed work done. Having points where your darkest tone and your lightest tone meet are going to give you that feeling of 3-dimension. So think about what parts of the bird are sitting forward and what parts of the bird are sitting back. For example, the wing sits forward and so therefore will create a shadow around it. So the wing will be lighter than the area around it. Having those shadows will make that wing look as if it is sitting forward. When working, I like to work across the surface and not focus on one area at once. This way I find that it helps with proportions and making sure that everything is sitting right. Sometimes I find that if you focus on one area too much and then go on to move on to the rest of the painting, you can find that that area that you've been focusing all that time on is actually out of proportion with the rest of the drawing. So working across the piece and working up slowly is a good way to make sure that proportions are right throughout the drawing. Using a white gel pen, I'm now going to go through and add some little highlights, ruffles in the feathers, and exaggerate those points of contrast again. I love using the white gel pen because it is water soluble and you can blend it out with your brush to create a seamless finish. Now colouring in the branch. I'm starting off again with the lightest colour first and just spreading that out with my watercolour brush. Then while the surface is still wet, I'm going in with my darker brown colour and just adding the shadows. Where the bird is perched is going to be darker because the bird will be casting a shadow. Just check over and make sure that you're happy with the way everything's sitting, that your shadows and your highlights are in the right place. And once you're happy with it, it's time to start cutting it out. Once your page is fully dry, grab a craft knife and gently start carving out your bird. Here I'm using a ceramic blade knife with a very sharp, very small point. I find this the easiest to use for detailed cutting such as this bird. Making sure I get as close to the edge as possible so I don't have any white parts left. It can be tricky, so just take your time. Remember to cut out the negative spaces as well. Once fully cut, gently pop it out of the sheet of paper. Make sure every section is cut. And voila, you have your collage layer. To start sticking it down, I'm using some craft glue and a paintbrush and just applying glue liberally to the background. You can also use a glue stick if you find that easier. Just make sure it's acid free. Once you've applied the glue to the background, place the bird where you want it on your painting. I like to have the branch overlapping the border just so it looks a bit more three-dimensional. Gently apply the bird to the surface with your fingers, just gently pushing it down and making sure that the glue covers the whole backing. Once it's gently stuck down, get a clean piece of plain copy paper and using your fingers firmly press the bird down. Using the paper will prevent you getting from any finger marks over the page and also prevent you from smudging the drawing. You may find that you'll need a little bit more glue in some areas. Just using your brush, just gently place it underneath. And then repeat the process with the piece of paper again. Just check that it's stuck down properly and you're happy with it. And there it is, your finished watercolour collage piece. Well, that concludes our watercolour collage project. I hope you enjoyed creating this piece. Remember to check out our Facebook page and feel free to share with us your finished pieces. We would love to see them. Thank you and stay creative.